So many professionals still think opportunities mostly come from applying to posted roles or doing enough good work that eventually somebody notices them. And don't get me wrong, you still need to apply online for the majority of positions, and people still get promoted based on merit. But inside of a lot of organizations, people are talking, they're having conversations way before a role officially opens. Leaders are constantly discussing who they trust, who can handle more responsibility in their position, and who they even want involved in certain projects and conversations. Those names, they start circulating very early, especially when leadership knows that something is coming down the pipeline. This is why sponsorship and access matter so much in your career, and it's what we are going to unpack in this episode. Welcome to Control Your Career. I'm Julia Toothaker, your strategic career consultant, and I'm so glad that you're here. This season is about career leverage, how your career evolves once credibility is established and you're ready to be strategic. In the last episode, we talked about influence, especially influence when you don't have a title. Now, today, we're going to be taking that next step, and we're going to be looking at sponsorship, advocacy, and access to the right conversations. We're going to break down how opportunities come about in organizations and what increases the likelihood that your name is part of those conversations earlier. I want to first start by talking about the difference between mentorship and sponsorship. I think this is really important because I think some people don't really understand what sponsorship is, and they're trying to use mentorship in replace of that. Now, a mentor can be a sponsor, but you can have a mentor that's a mentor and you can have a sponsor that's a sponsor. One distinction that I will make between the two is mentors usually know that they're a mentor. Sponsors generally are not a formalized position, right? It's not a formalized title. It's just something that you know that person is a sponsor for you. Okay. So let's talk about the difference. So mentorship is going to be about advice. They're going to be helping you understand your position and your career. And sponsorship is more about access and that advocacy that I mentioned. So let's break down mentorship a little bit more into the roles that a mentor might play for you. So ultimately, a mentor is going to help you grow. They're really about giving advice. They're giving you a perspective from their experience, from all of their wisdom and their time in the field that you're in, or just generally as a professional. So many of us that have been working for so long, we have so much knowledge and things that we want to share. And so we want to give that away in the form of a mentorship. Mentors are going to help you think through different decisions. They're going to help you think through situations that you're dealing with on a daily basis, depending on how often you meet with a mentor. It's important to note that sometimes a manager can be a mentor, but I would say that is not as common. It depends on the relationship that you have with that person. I think managers take on mentorship traits, but they are also somebody that you report to. So there's a formalized relationship there where if you have a mentor that is somewhere else in the organization or outside the organization, which is what I would recommend, then that person has no say in what you do, so they can be a more neutral voice in your career. So a good mentor is not only going to be positive and help you see the positives about who you are as a professional, but they're also going to give you feedback on some of the blind spots that you might have. So they're really going to be honest about what they're seeing in terms of your behavior and your choices, how you're showing up in the workplace. So if you have a mentor that is only giving you positive things, you might want to push for some of that feedback that's going to be a little bit more constructive. Mentors are also going going to help you build confidence. I think, again, they're going to give you that positive feedback and they're going to remind you why you are good at what you do and how you got to where you are. And I think just by having a relationship with somebody who's more seasoned in the professional world, whatever that looks like for you, I think that helps build confidence either way. I mentioned that a good mentor to have would be somebody that's in your industry or in your field. I think we can have a lot of different types of mentors, and you definitely need to have one that is in your field or your industry if that is something that you want to stay within. So, obviously, it doesn't make sense if you like to move around a lot. But if you have a function that you're in that you want to really get to know and move up within that function, but you don't care about the industry, then find somebody who has done that, who has been in different industries, but has been doing the same type of work. I think another thing a good mentor is going to do is they're just going to help educate you generally about what is happening in the market, what is happening in whatever your respective area is. And so you're going to have conversations about that. They're going to prompt those conversations. They're going to help you build skills, not necessarily teach you, but make sure that you are building the right skills for the positions that you want in the future of your career. And I think more often the skill development with mentors is around your judgment and your decision making, because you are likely coming to them with different scenarios within, your work day and what's going on. And so they're helping you think through, how do you manage, how do you work through these different situations? And then that is going to help build your judgment. We had another episode not too long ago where we talked about that. I think it was the 5 skills episode, where judgment was one of the skills that I was like, you have to be developing judgment if you want to be moving ahead in your career. And so having a mentor that's helping you do that regularly is such a good win for you as a professional. So some things that you might hear a mentor say, and again, this is different from sponsorship. You might hear them say, here's how I would approach that. Or here is a similar situation that I went through in my career and the choices that I made and what I would have done different, or what I would do different in the climate now. So they're really giving you perspective and advice. They'll say things like, you might want to think about this differently. Here's another perspective. Or how can we think about something from this person's perspective? So they're forcing you to put yourself in somebody else's shoes to help make decisions and choices and help them understand, help you understand the other person's perspective. So remember, mentorship is generally going to be focused on growth, learning, development, and then perspective. So let's get into sponsorship. I really don't hear a lot of people talk about sponsorship as a formalized word, but it happens a lot. And so I think it's worth talking about, because my guess is a lot of you listening to this have had sponsors throughout your career. You just did not call them that. And so this, I think, will help you figure out, like, oh yes, that person was a sponsor and here's why. So sponsors really are about access. Okay. These are people who are recommending you for opportunities. They understand who you are as a professional. They understand your strengths. They understand some of your weaknesses or areas for improvement, but they are advocating for you when you are not in the room. They are somebody that is going to bring your name into conversation. So remember, in the opening, we talked about, like, are you the person that is in the room? Is somebody calling your name, right? That is part of the access that you need. And sometimes we don't have that access because of the position that we have, and we need somebody else to come in and help provide that access. This is somebody that is going to advocate for you. And it might not be a manager. I think managers can be sponsors, but a really effective sponsor is somebody that you do not report to, or that's a couple levels away from you. And so somebody that Again, when you're not in the room, they're going to say, oh, yes, that is the person that you do need. I want to advocate for them. This is also somebody that informally will connect you to people that are influential either within the organization or sometimes just within the industry or the function itself. And so it's somebody that a lot of times is very well connected. They can also refer you to positions outside of the organization. So if you have a sponsor that's not in your organization, that's actually really cool because then you get pulled into different experiences that other people might not get pulled into that can really help the external image of your career. So looking at those external sponsors and internal sponsors is going to be really helpful for you. Um, a good sponsor is going to increase your visibility with leadership. So a lot of times a sponsor is going to be in some kind of leadership position, but not always. Sometimes they are just somebody that has a voice that people listen to, and that is also very helpful. So you want to make sure that the sponsors that you see in your career, they do have some kind of access. And again, this is not formalized. So it's not like you can point at somebody and go, that person's going to be my sponsor. I think these are things that happen very organically. But once you recognize that somebody is sponsoring you, then you can be a little bit more intentional about that relationship in order to help it thrive and again, help you help them educate other people. Sponsors are also going to tap you for projects, even if it's not directly related to what you do, but they see the value that you have brought in other areas. They're going to pull you into that. This is somebody that really is helping build your credibility, again, specifically when you are not in the room. And the one thing that I think is so important for people to understand is a sponsor is putting their reputation on the line for you. So when somebody is advocating for you and you understand that that's what's happening, you also have to conduct yourself in a way that is going to be worthy of that person's sponsorship. And I think if you know that somebody has gone to bat for you, if you know that somebody has advocated for you, especially for specific positions, specific projects, always try to connect back with that person, give them updates, thank them, like keep them apprised of what's going on. If you're struggling in the position that they advocated for you, then you need to go to them and say, hey, I'm struggling with this, and now treat them a little bit more like a mentor so that, again, you're not tarnishing their reputation. So sponsors are going to use different language than mentors. So the mentors had more, let me support you, let me help educate you. You know, those were more of the conversations that we were having with mentors. With sponsors, you're going to hear things like, that person is ready for this. They're ready to take on this position. I think that they should be included. They're ready, right? I think that we need to talk to this person before we make this decision because of XYZ. They've been there before. I saw them do this in another position, so I want their opinion on what's going on here. And the most honorable thing that they can say, I trust their judgment. I trust their judgment. Right? So sponsors are going to be focused more on opportunity, access, advocacy, visibility, and ultimately advancement. And some of this, I think for some sponsors that know what they're doing this strategically because they want certain people around them. They're building teams. They're building people within an organization that they trust that will trust them back. So these are very, very strategic moves by people who do sponsorships. But again, this is not something that is formalized. This is something that just happened. So I want you to think about in your career, who has advocated for you? Who has advocated for you with really like no strategic gain in some instances? Those are going to be people that are your sponsors or who have been sponsors. Now, don't go to them and say, "Hey, thank you so much for being a sponsor in my career." They're going to be like, "What?" I think the more general language you want to use is, "Hey, thank you for advocating for me for this position. Thank you for putting my name in the hat for this project. That really meant a lot to me." Right? So those are the types of conversations that you're having with those people. But just so that you know, that is what we would call a sponsorship. And I think it's so important to have this distinction because it gets mixed up. I think sometimes we think that we have a sponsor, but they're really a mentor, and we're expecting something out of them that they're never going to give. So you as a professional have to understand the different roles that these people play in your career. And sometimes they'll switch, right? Sometimes they'll switch. Sometimes you'll become the sponsor or you'll become the mentor in certain scenarios. So you just want to think about that and kind of go back through your career, think about where you're at now and what that looks like and who those people are. And do we need to do some, outreach to make sure that those people know how much we appreciate them? So I think what's important in this conversation is to understand that so many conversations around career opportunities in an organization are happening informally before anything is publicly announced. In another episode, I talked about the hidden job market a little bit. This is a version of that, but internally within an organization. So some organizations are required to post positions for a certain number of days, but a lot of times there is already somebody internally that they know that they are going to tap. And so that's why a lot of times you might be the person that applies for the position externally and you go through the entire process and everybody loves you and you don't get the position. And then what I always suggest, if you make it to the final the final interview, then you need to look at who got hired. You need to be like sleuthing out on LinkedIn or on the company website who got that position. Because if they were somebody that was already working there, you never stood a chance. You were brought in to just be just a mirror to that person to see what the company wanted to see, what they could potentially get. And they wanted to compare, and that's it. And I know that that's really frustrating for some of you, especially because so many people are looking for work right now, but that is the reality of the situation. So it's important for you to understand when you're already in a company and you're trying to get to that next step, you're trying to, get that promotion, these conversations are happening and you need to be a part of them. Leaders are going to be discussing these positions before they're official. And so you want to make sure that if it's something you're interested in, you have started to plant seeds with the right people. Okay. I think a lot of times the stretch assignments that we do are really helpful because sometimes it can get us connected to other people in the organization, but it also shows like, hey, I'm willing to take on a little bit more. I think too, especially with larger organizations, there is a resistance to network internally, right? We kind of stay in our little bubble, we stay with our team, and we don't really go outside of that. If you are somebody that wants to move up, if you want to advance, you have to start networking within the organization. And that might mean doing some things that you don't want to do. But it just depends on how bad you want it and where you want your career to go within that organization. And you have to remember that some professionals are even going to hear about opportunities earlier because they're having the right conversations with the right people, or they're in the right meeting at the right time to hear about it. And so if a conversation is happening and you hear it and you go, oh, there is an opportunity there, then you can get in with those people immediately to say, hey, this is something I'm interested in and here's why. So you want to always be listening for those opportunities, but also understand that they are happening before anything formal ever gets put on to paper. And so that's why we want to have these sponsorships. We want to have these people who know who we are, who can advocate and be that voice in the room, right? So I want you to ask yourself, are you somebody that is hearing about opportunities really early when it's an idea? Are you hearing about it when it's too late? The position's been posted and that's how you find out about the opportunity? Or have they hired somebody? You didn't even know the opportunity was out there. They hired somebody and now somebody's coming in and you didn't even realize that the opportunity was there. So you need to be honest with yourself about where you are in the organization in terms of communication and knowing about these different opportunities. Okay, I've mentioned a couple of times being in the right conversations. And I think that this is something that is very underutilized for most professionals. And I think that that's because we are all so resistant to meetings and we don't want to have another meeting and we don't want to get on another call. And it's frustrating and it takes up time. But I want you to change your mindset around meetings. Now, some meetings are not worth it, and I understand that. But there are some meetings that are giving you access. You're either getting access to certain people or you're getting access to certain information, right? And so you want to be a part of those conversations. When you're part of some of those idea conversations, those more informal talks, that's when you get put into these conversations. I cannot tell you how many times I would get pulled into meetings for things that were not related to anything that I was doing, but my brain worked a certain way. And so that group really valued my opinion. They valued, what I brought to the table. So they would bring me into those conversations so that I could provide that opinion. Now, for some of you, you're going to say, okay, well, if there's no senior leaders, then it doesn't matter. That's not true either. Yes, we obviously want to be with the senior leaders that are making a lot of the hiring decisions, but you also want to be in the rooms with people who influence the senior leaders. You want to be in the room with people who are going to say things about you, positive or negative, when they're having lunch, when they're out for coffee, when they go to the mixer, right? So you don't want to turn down opportunities that potentially allow you to show what you can do so that somebody else can advocate for you that might end up putting you in the right room. And I know some of you are going to be like, Julia, this is so much work. This is so much to think about. It's not. It's just being aware. It's being aware of what's going on and then where you can be strategic, be strategic. It's basically going, I'm invited to a meeting. What is it about this meeting that is helpful for me? Who's going to be in the room? What's the topic? How can I make a positive impression? So it's just taking a second to think about your meetings and your interactions in a different way rather than writing everything off as being frustrating and you not wanting to be there, right? Okay. Something I've been talking a lot about and I'm going to reiterate in this episode is bias. And the reason we have to talk about it in just about every episode is because it is so important in these conversations about access because people's bias are going to impact the access that you have. Access is not neutral. It's not a neutral thing in the working world. Not everybody is going to have the same level of access, the same visibility, and they're not going to have advocacy, right? Some people will never be advocated for in the workplace. And so if you are somebody that has been advocated for, consider yourself, very lucky because there are people that will likely never be advocated for various reasons. Okay. So we have to be honest about the fact that bias is going to influence who gets included in a lot of these conversations and whose name gets thrown on the table for different opportunities. Some professionals are getting coached more informally, right? Like I'm a traditional coach. People hire me and I coach them. There are so many people that will never need somebody like me because they have so many people in their professional world or their life that just informally coach them just because of who they are. Because people see the value, they see the hard work, they see all of these things, and they want to naturally help them. I think this idea of performance, we have the same performance and we're going to have the same access. I would love for that to be true, and it's not. Just because you and somebody else have the same performance does not mean you're going to have the same access. And there are a lot of situations where somebody has better performance and the other person who has less performance has more access. And that happens for a lot of reasons. Okay. I can't speculate on everything because every culture is different. Every person is different. And I could give you 1,000 combinations of why this could or could not happen. But you have to be aware of that. When I talk about realistic reality in my process and in my book, this is something that we talk about. What are potential bias that people can have toward you? I talk a lot about the bias of the fact that I'm a female. Some people will love that and they will advocate for me harder because I'm a female. Other people will not. They see that as a weakness. And so I won't have that advocacy. Some people are afraid of me because I'm really tall. I don't know. That's a physical bias that people have, which is part of why I love doing stuff online because you have no idea how tall I am. But I get into a room with people and there's an immediate like, oh, she is intimidating. And so then that changes the access that I have because I intimidate people. And that is a bias that people hold against me, right? So bias can happen on a lot of different levels about a lot of different things. So you have to understand what that could potentially be for you. I think more than anything, organizational culture comes into play here. We've all looked at the boards of organizations. We've all looked at the senior leaders of organizations and we make assumptions about that. And sometimes it's true and sometimes it's not. At the end of the day, the culture that you're a part of is really going to influence how you're treated and whether or not somebody is going to advocate for you. There are certain cultures where men are going to be advocated for more than women. There are certain cultures where if you're of a certain religion, you might get advocated for more than other people. Like there are so many different scenarios that a culture can bring. You're not going to find that as much in larger organizations because of just discrimination. They don't want to deal with discrimination, but it still happens. Even though there are discrimination laws out there, people still have their own bias. They still have their people that they like to work with. And sometimes those people look similar. Sometimes they don't. Right. And so you have to understand the culture that you're in and what is potentially going to move you forward in the organization and give you the access that you need. I think one of the best things to look at is, are you a part of informal conversations? So do people ask you to go to lunch? Do they ask you to grab coffee, grab dinner? Like, are people coming by your office just to chit chat if you're in person? Are they asking to jump on a Zoom just to talk through some things? When you're somebody that's a part of those informal conversations, yes, it can be frustrating because it can take away from your work. But depending on who the person is, it's actually a really good thing that you're in those conversations because it means that there's some trust there and that trust can lead to opportunities later. But also, sometimes people could take advantage of you. So you have to be aware of that as well and who is asking those questions, right? Okay, let's talk about the political nature of advocacy because you can have people advocate for you without it becoming a whole political thing. Because I know so many of you are like, I'm not playing the game. I don't want to be political. I'm not playing whatever this weird game is that these senior leaders are doing. And that's fine. This is, again, where understanding the culture that you're in is really helpful. So if you have a highly political culture, that might not be a good environment for you long term. So you do want to think about that. However, when you have really strong sponsorship, that sponsorship is gained through trust. It's not gained through being political in the organization. It's not gained through really heavy self promotion, although you still need some level of self promotion. People still need to know that you exist. Conversations still need to happen. But there are some people that are very politically savvy to the point where it becomes manipulative. And I don't think that you need to do that. But if the culture rewards that and you don't like that, you need to get out of that culture. So that is something to think about. We've talked about judgment before, and I want to reiterate that being somebody that is reliable when it comes to your judgment and somebody that people trust to have good judgment, that is something that's going to build advocacy. That's something that's going to show people, oh, I want that person on my team. I want that person connected to this project. Remember earlier we talked about how sponsors are putting their own reputation behind the people that they trust, right? And so that's not a political move. That's a trust move. And so when we look at senior leaders, they want people around them that they trust. And so they're going to advocate for those people. That's not a manipulation. Now, there are people that manipulate, and I've talked about this in other episodes, where that manipulation will only take you so far because you still have to perform. Right? And so if you cannot perform after you've done this big manipulation to get to where you're at, you're going to end up out anyway. So that's where it's helpful to not play that game, because you're going to be constantly catching up so that you can live up to whatever you said that you could do or be. I think one of the other things that's going to help you earn advocacy, right? So if we don't want to be political, we want to earn it. We need to be solving difficult problems. I think that this is something that people resist a lot right now because they don't want to do extra work. But at the end of the day, if you want to stay in your organization and you want to be promoted, you have to show people that you want to be there. So if there are difficult things that are trying to be solved and you can help solve them, be that person, because there's going to be opportunity for you somewhere. And at the end of the day, if there's not, then leave. You don't have to stay. You can go somewhere else and take that experience somewhere else. Cross-functional work, I think, is such a good opportunity to help build that advocacy without being political. That exposes us to people in other parts of the organization that we maybe don't work with normally, but we need to work with on this particular project or this special thing. If your organization has like employee groups or employee activities, those are great teams to be a part of. And again, I know some of you are going to roll your eyes and be like, I'm not giving more time to the company, da, 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 da. Okay, fine. But if you want people to advocate for you outside of your team and you want to get to know people in other departments, that's a really great way to do that. So again, this is for people who actually care about their career, who want more, and who want to stay and move up within an organization. And then something that I believe is so underrated is thoughtful communication. I think we have to really think about how we are communicating to people, not just written, but also verbally and in different presentations and different things that we're doing. We have to be clear. We have to communicate clearly, communicate with intention, communicate in a way that helps people understand who we are and why we are here doing this. And as much as I am an AI advocate to an extent, I think this is sometimes where AI can dilute our communication. So if you're somebody that is using AI a lot, I would urge you to not use it for everything and don't let it be your voice 100%. Have it be a support for you, but you need to own your voice because as soon as you get up in front of a group and you start speaking, that's going to give you away. That's going to be the point where people go, oh, that person maybe doesn't actually know what they're talking about. And it's because you may have used AI a little bit too much. So really think about that when it comes to communication. So we can get advocacy without all the political nonsense and the manipulation. And I know for some of you are going to say my organization is not like that. The people I've seen move up, they are political. Okay, then that is that culture and maybe that is not the right culture for you. So that's what you have to ask yourself. I've talked a lot about compounding leverage. How do we compound leverage? Sponsorship is one of, I think, the main ways that we can do that. And sponsorship just makes it soar. Sponsorship creates such a big influence in your career leverage. I can't even explain it. The opportunities that I have received because somebody has vouched for me are crazy. Now, I've had opportunities where people haven't vouched for me and it's worked out really well. But the ones where somebody has put my name in the hat and I've been able to go and do the thing and fulfill it, oh my gosh, such amazing opportunities. So, sponsorship is absolutely going to compound the leverage that you have within your career. And it's going to happen just so quickly, especially within an organization where you're already known to some extent. That sponsorship really increases the visibility and the trust at the same time. People are going to trust you because of the person that is sponsoring you, and then you're getting visibility because they're talking about you. The access that you can get just to be in the room, to be on a call because somebody said, hey, I want them to listen in on this. I can't tell you, I've had a couple of opportunities. It's so funny. I'm not working for an organization right now. I own my own business, but I'm still asked to be in certain conversations for people that have known me for a long time. So different things that they're doing in their career or with their organization, and they just want a perspective or they want my brain in the room. And it's been so interesting to be on that side of it and be asked to be in the room because of how you work. And that's such an honor to me that somebody trusts me enough to come in and be a part of that somebody is putting their name on the line because of who I am. Now I have to back that up, right? I have to show up and I have to perform. I have to do the things, right? But still, it creates a level of just trust automatically because I'm connected to somebody, right? And that person is advocating for me. And then any influence that you get from all of this, especially from sponsorship, your influence is going to create additional advocacy. You're going to see people say your name, tag you, include you on an email, right? Because your name is getting out there. And I think when we're talking about internal leverage, I think sponsorship is really the number one thing that you can do and work toward in order to have the most leverage within an organization. I had really amazing sponsorship in an organization, and it was part of why I actually ended up staying in an organization longer than I should have. And the sponsorship was amazing because they understood who I was and what I brought to the table. The problem was everything else was a mess. And the leader that I directly reported to was a mess. And so I had a hard time reconciling those two because I didn't want to let my sponsors down, but I also could not work for this person anymore and ultimately ended up leaving. But I think had I stayed and continued through, my opportunities probably would have looked different, but my mental health would have suffered. So even though we have sponsorships within an organization, we also have to make sure that the organization is where we want to be. So if you're listening to this and you're like, "Ooh, sponsorship, I love this idea," make sure that you want to stay in your current organization, because if you don't, then we're looking at external sponsorship. And again, that looks a little similar, but looks a little bit different. That's where you're going to want to build relationships with people, maybe in your industry, right, through some industry events versus focusing your time internally. So same concepts, but you're just going externally instead of internally. And I will say so much career advice still focuses almost entirely on performance. And it's almost like your work ethic and how much you get done will automatically create equal access and opportunity. And that's just not true. And I'm sorry for people that still think that way, but it's just not that way. Organizations are more complicated than that. And it's because it's humans who are running them. So often we say, oh, corporate, the organization. There are people making those decisions. There are humans making those decisions. And humans are not always going to get it right. People are going to advocate for who they trust. The leaders at these organizations, they're taking notes, they're taking tabs on people who are doing more, who are going the extra mile, who are making themselves known in a positive way. And they're comparing notes and they're having conversations and they're talking about it. Trust me, I've been in those conversations. People are being talked about and you're being tapped for certain things specifically. So those opportunities are forming before anything happens publicly, whether that's a public position, a new position being put out to the public, or it's a, advancement opportunity for you or just something internally within the organization. So I think sometimes it can feel political and it can feel manipulative. And we talked about that, right? There are ways where it doesn't have to be that. Because so many of us can't be bothered. We don't want to be part of the politics. We don't want to feel that we are being manipulated, and we also don't want to manipulate other people. And you don't have to do it that way. There are so many other ways to do it, but you have to understand the culture that you are in. So if you see certain patterns, those are going to tell you a story in terms of your organization and what that organization values in terms of leverage. And that might change your choices. It might change whether or not you stay with that organization or go somewhere else. So this week, I want you to pay attention to who is being included early in conversations, whose perspective is being asked of, whose name or names are coming up repeatedly when there's new opportunities and new things happening and those discussions are happening. Because I think those patterns, they're going to tell you so much about the organization and what they are looking for. So in our next episode, we are going to talk about lateral moves and why sometimes those lateral career decisions will increase leverage while others might not. It's going to be a good one. I'll see you next time. And remember, you control your career.